Hello, everybody, and welcome to On the Move, a show where we share transportation, sales, and marketing success stories. I am Jennifer Karpus-Romain, Executive Director of TMSA, a trade nonprofit educating and connecting marketing and sales professionals in transportation and logistics. And today on the show, I have Holly LaBoda, Chief Growth Officer and founder of Formula L. How are you doing today, Holly?
I'm doing so great. So great to be here with you and talking about this.
Yes, I'm very excited. We have known each other for a long time now through TMSA. We served on the board together on the education committee. Then you came into a leadership role on the board, serving as education chair. And then I moved over to HQ here at TMSA. We actually did the first TMSA LinkedIn Live together, which seems like a million years ago at this point. But for anyone who kind of doesn't know your story arc and your time, tell us about your career and all the work that you've done that have gotten you to Formula L.
Oh, yes. Okay. How to sum it up really quick.
Yeah, very quick.
So I've been working in sales development and specifically in like logistics industry sales development for a couple of decades now. I worked internally at C.H. Robinson for about 10 years. For the last 8 years, I've run a company called Luminaries Consulting, and now I'm jumping into a new chapter called Formula L, which we're here to talk about today. But I have loved all of this kind of work, like the strategy development and leadership development and process improvement and talent development. And it's just like called to me kind of throughout my career, and logistics has been a space that has been very good to me too. Like it's so much fun. It's so challenging. It changes every day. That gets to be a lot, but it keeps us on our toes and it's so much fun. So I do love those spaces I work in.
Absolutely. And yes, I was kind of laughing when I introduced you because a lot of people would be like, oh, I thought she was at Luminaries. And you are starting a new chapter. And it's very exciting to watch you kind of launch something new again and really working through that. So what shifted you to kind of build Formula L right now? Why is right now the right moment for this shift for you?
Yeah. I really think of it as like this, you have like your evolution and your revolution. And I think this is definitely like an evolutionary thing for me. Over the last 8 years of running these kinds of companies and working with all kinds of leaders in logistics spaces and helping their sales teams grow, we've learned a lot. And even at Luminaries, we were kind of evolving into this kind of what I'm doing now, not just working on developing the talent, but helping the leaders build their capabilities, because the talent development will only get so far if the leaders aren't modeling and coaching and holding people accountable in the right way. Clarifying the growth strategy, building the good systems, all of this stuff has to come together. And we've been kind of moving in that direction, especially over the last like 3 years, I would say. And this is really like distilling everything that I've learned about what does and doesn't work in logistics sales growth into a system to make it a little bit easier for people to do.
Mm. And over the years, we've had a lot of those conversations and about growth. Like you said, if there's only so far you can go if the leadership isn't coaching and doing things the right way. So there's kind of this like what sounds good versus what actually works. So what are you seeing companies get wrong right now when they say they want to grow, but then they're not actually doing that proper work to get to where they need to?
Yeah, I think it's very easy for people to focus on the wrong thing or start in the wrong place when it comes to growth. Because when we're talking about sales, all of the outcomes that you're aiming for are just so painfully visible to everybody, and it sounds so simple. If we're not hitting our sales numbers, well, we just need to do more selling or help our sellers be better sellers. And yes, that might be part of the situation. It could be some capability development on your team. It could be that people just need more activity, but it's probably more than that. I find usually like people don't run into these growth challenges for lack of effort or lack of good intention. It's because it's just not easy enough to follow the right path. And sometimes there are things that are slowing people down, like friction in their process. They don't even realize it's there because you don't feel it all the time. So pulling some of that out makes growth like easier, more predictable, rather than just like shoving a new tool or shoving a new program down people's throat and like hoping you get some ROI.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think a lot of times I see people focus on like the beginning, like, oh, I have a new hire, let me train them, let me do their onboarding for a couple months, but then they just are like, oh, then they know everything. And that's not the case. You have to do continued training, making sure you're doing proper touch points and stepping up. So I think it's clear that Formula L may be a new brand, but this is clearly built on a lot of experience. Like you said, you've had decades of experience, which is crazy to me because you look so young and yet but I it's been cool to like watch our careers grow together and see you build into something. And I know, yeah, we talked a lot about developing those leaders. So what problem are you then most excited to help leaders solve through this work and really helping them to execute on as you move along?
Well, I think that the part that like the outcome that I'm most excited to deliver for leaders is like just a little bit less of like the feeling of the chaos and the pain of growth. I don't know if you feel this way, like have ever felt this way in your work life or your personal life, but sometimes you just feel like you're kind of getting run over by stuff. Like you're
All
doing
the
all the same things, you get a little exhausted. You're like, why is this so hard? And I work with all kinds of sales leaders that whether they say that or not, I can tell are feeling that way. And it just
time.
doesn't have to be that hard. And creating some clarity at the beginning, aligning your system so they're working for you, not against you. That's where all the chaos and the pain of the growth comes from. And once you can start putting some of those pieces together, you're creating just a much smoother road for you to ride on and grow on.
And I think part of that is just an alignment breakdown. Like
Mhm.
where are we going? How are we coaching? What is the path? What is the process? When it comes to that breakdown, where does that growth kind of usually stall first? Is it in a strategy, in the leadership, in the execution, in the team? Where are we seeing that friction kind of begin?
I think the where it shows up like most painfully and obviously to me at least from my lens that I approach it with is in the execution part. So that's where you see it, where you're like, oh, just my sellers don't want to sell enough. It's usually not that. It's usually like a system that you're putting into their execution that's making it harder for them to do what you're asking them to do. For example, I'm working with a client right now we're working on a big playbook, and we were working on a certain piece of it, and they're like, we need better proposals, so let's put some proposal tools out there. And they started to talk about the rate sheets that they send, and I'm like, hold on, you want people selling consultatively, but you're giving them rate sheets as a proposal tool. Here, that's a conflict, that's some friction. And I had another client a couple of years ago who wanted to do like a consultative selling development with their folks, and they kicked off the session by talking about how they were going to incent them for all the RFPs they're going after. And I was like, hold up. You're incenting them to do something that is very different than what you're telling them you want them to do. So there's a conflict. So sometimes it's just about pulling that stuff apart and saying, if this is where you want to go, let's make sure all the system that's underneath your sellers is aligned with this. That's what helps you get to your goal.
Do you find that when you're in those conversations with leaders that they respond to that well and they're like, oh, absolutely, Holly, this is the missing piece? Or are they like, no, we're going to keep doing it our way? Like, how do you get them to buy in that that process should be aligned in that way?
Well, there's a lot of good influence skills that are needed there, that's for sure. But usually, I work with companies who usually are open to a partnership and want that kind of advice. And if they don't, then I won't work with them.
Mhm.
But or we would call it a day at some point. But I just start by asking a question and pointing out the gaps. So you're telling me you want this, and then you're doing this. How does that feel to you? And then we start to solve it together. So I'm usually not telling them, hey, you're doing something really, really wrong here. I'll
Mhm.
just point out, like, this is what you told me you want, and this is what you're telling your team. Let's talk about how those things don't align.
Mm. And then how do you trickle that down into the team to start then making those changes and them to understand that the reason why those shifts and changes are happening is because you're trying to align that process better for them ultimately.
Yeah, well, it's alignment, exactly the word that you use. So we start with clarifying or creating that strategy. We roll that strategy out to the team. So every time we're talking about a big shift, it's not, hey, we're rolling out, this this new program or this new CRM, or we're holding you accountable to this for like a random reason because we want to be big brother. It's because we want to make it easier for you to hit your goals, and we want to make it easier and more predictable for the company to hit their goals. And then once you kind of create that, there's still some change management and friction that happens with it, but you find if people understand the why enough, and then you create the clarity of the how and make it easy enough for them to do it, you don't have as much friction in the process.
Hmm. And if someone listening right now is leading a team and they are feeling that growth is feeling really heavy, maybe heavier than it used to, there's such, like we talked about in this industry, change is always happening and it's really, really fast. And sometimes that can be overwhelming. Kind of what's that first question you would encourage them to ask themselves before they make their next move, before they create a new process or take their next step somewhere?
Yeah. I think when I see people run into like where that growth feels heavy or the growth feels hard, it's usually when their strategy or their intention as an organization outgrows the current system or structure they have. So if you start by asking that question is what is our strategy or what's our direction? If you don't know the answer to that question, there's a place to start. But then figure out once you have that, does our current infrastructure, the structure that our teams live in, the systems that support them, which means like the processes, not just the technology, does all of that align? And if the answer is no, or if you think, or if you're not sure, that's the place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always, whether I'm like talking to people on the marketing side, the sales time, operation side, everyone should know like your company goals, your company values, what you're trying to achieve, and then how your part fits into that bubble.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't, like that's what I used to like when I was director of marketing at a company before. I would ask, like people would shoot ideas to me and I'd be like, but how is that achieving our goals? Like, how is that task going to help us get to where we want to go? And yeah, if you don't have the answer to that, I'm not going to do it because I'm trying to do the things we're trying to do and make sure that my piece of that puzzle aligns to that overall. And I feel like that is a really good place to start because things can turn chaotic very quickly and
Mhm.
it's hard to stop mid rolling down the hill. So let's stop before we just like teeter over the side and like really think through like how does this piece help? And then also how can we help our teams understand how they fit into that bigger piece and how with their sales goals or their quotas, how does that meet our overall company goals? Because then they start to get that clarity of how they fit in overall as well as themselves.
Yeah. And I always start work with a client with a bit of an assessment to kind of get a lay of the land with how mature or how well set up is your sales organization, and how are your leaders doing, and then how are your sellers doing, and that kind of gets a good perspective of kind of current state, and that can help pull out some of those things that might be slowing us down, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, it makes sense we're feeling this way because we might think we have a sales process, but when I go ask all the sellers what their sales process is, they're telling me all kinds of different things. That happens all of the time. When I ask about commercial strategy, when I ask about who your ideal customers are, I get one answer from the leaders and a very different answer from the salespeople, or 100 different answers from the salespeople. That's when you know there's not alignment.
Absolutely. And then how does kind of, we talked about how like your strategy is more than just the technology that you use, but technology is a piece of that strategy, how you're using it, how regularly you're using it, how you update it. How do you make sure those two components are working together to create the best output for a team?
Hmm. Well, ideally, if I had my druthers, we would say, like, let's start with your strategy and figure out what you're trying to achieve and then how we want to achieve it. Then build the systems that we want to have, and by like processes and kind of approaches to the world, enablement structures. And then we figure out what technology we need to drive some efficiency within that system. We're not always starting from scratch that way, though. So then we have to kind of figure out where the gaps are and shore that up. But putting like layering on tech before you have your strategy and your systems is where potentially you get like things that will slow you down even more. It can create more friction, but at best, you're getting a wasted investment.
hmm Absolutely. And I think that if you invest in your tech before you know exactly what you want the tech to do, that like back in my like CRM days, that was one of like the biggest things that I would always like remind people, even coming to TMSA and speak, people be like, well, what is the best CRM system? Like there isn't one. It's the best for what your needs are at the price point that you have. Like I would do a whole presentation. People would still ask me at the end. I'm like, did you listen to anything? Because
give me the answer, Jen.
yes, but it's like, it's really about like what you need that system to do. And part of that is checking in with your sales team and being like, what would make your life easier? What do you wish the system would do? Things like that. But it's really because you need all those things to match and work together, and you want people to use the system, of course. But sometimes people would just like go out and buy it, and then you're like, this system can't even do the three things I really needed to do, or those capabilities.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. And or those capabilities are at a tier that's so high and I don't need all the other features. So I don't want to pay for that price point. And then you get that like pushback on the ROI of the systems that you bought. Whereas if you did that systems check, that processes check, making sure, hey, these are like the core things that we really want our technology to do to match what our process does, then you don't end up with that gap. And I feel like, I don't know about what you're seeing, but what I'm seeing in the market right now is ROI on all of the things that we're spending money on is hugely important. And so process first, tech by the
Yeah. And most companies just don't need like a sales enablement tech stack that has 42 tools in it. Like it's just not necessary. So if you want a bigger bang for your buck, invest in your strategy, invest in your process, invest in your sellers, invest in your leaders, and a little bit of the tech that supports it.
Yeah. And two, like with those 42 tools, are you using them?
Yeah.
Like, are your team, like if your team can't use the tools that have like 40 or let's say 4 capabilities, how are they going to get up to that 42? And especially as you see like a lot of these software components come in with like AI tools, and like you definitely want to be creating processes and systems and regulation around how they can use AI in your processes and things like that. So I think people who skip that step are missing really fundamental pieces of their strategy and how to really maximize your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And not thinking about how you're going to implement it is also a big challenge with tech. Just to keep down that rabbit hole for a second. I mean, there's SaaS selling is like the most advanced selling there is all of the time for a reason. They're really, really good sellers. But most software as a service, like in sales companies that I have seen, focus less on the implementation side of it. It's like once it's sold, like they're good. And that doesn't help you get your ROI. You really have to think about how you're going to enable this within your organization to make your leaders use it, your sellers use it, your customers, depending on what it is, to get that ROI from it. So sometimes we help our clients with that too.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And like we talked about at the beginning, like sometimes then we only focus on the onboarding. So even with like sometimes, okay, we'll sell it, we'll maybe give you like 3 months and then you're done. But what about after 3 months? What happens if you have new team members come in and they're not there during that onboarding? So you still have to create onboarding for them and continued education. Like there's going to be people who don't go into the system every day, but still need to know how to use the system, or they'll revert back to the way they used to do things. Like we talked about, you said, oh, if I go into a company and ask a leader what their process is versus each individual seller, it can be all different. And so, creating that rhythm so they're all on the same page, they have that alignment, hugely important. And then it'll make the technology work better anyway.
Absolutely.
So I want to kind of talk about Formula L in itself for a little bit, because like we talked about, like you have worked in the industry for a long time. You had a different company and this is your evolution. And I think that we've all kind of tackled new things. It can be a mix of excitement and risk and scariness. So for you, Holly, what feels most energizing about this new chapter for you?
Oh, I'm super energized by like by this system itself, like the product that we're rolling out in this kind of package approach. I think it makes sense. It answers so many questions that I've seen so many leaders struggle with over my career. And it just kind of distills it in a way that just is obvious and makes growth like easier on everyone. And I'm really excited about that, about working with people a little bit differently, about getting smoother, faster results, and making the growth feel less burdensome and less chaotic to folks.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what that process looks like and what those kind of components will be if people work with you now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Formula L is a sales operating system, and it's designed to take a little bit of the chaos out of growth. The tagline is stop chasing growth, start driving it. Like get in, take the wheel, like to go in that little analogy for a second. Like stop being like a victim of your own growth and start being like a leader in it. So it's starting with helping people clarify their strategy. We call that the illuminate stage. So we just get people a good lay of the land of their current state. We create a growth roadmap together of where they want to be and how to get there. And then we start implementing it. And then the following pieces are leverage. Let's figure out what is working well for you and how we can get more of that. That's the systems and processes piece of it. Let's equip your leaders to be able to model, coach, hold people accountable. This is like the key piece that I think no other system that I've seen has pulled together. People underestimate the role that leaders have in this in terms of the accountability and the coaching component. People want to do it well, but it's the first thing they stop doing when they get kind of too overwhelmed. And then the last piece is the lift. And that's where we really work with your sellers to improve their capabilities and make it easier for them to grow too. So it kind of all works together in a beautiful way and like feeds each other. So we go back to the strategy on a quarterly basis and make sure that we're still making the progress that we want, and we reassess it, and then we go back through the rest of the process again and figure out the system changes when our strategy changes. It's just a really good like loop to make it easier to grow.
I love that. I remember seeing kind of early iterations of your dreams. And so it's cool. I always love to watch things go from like that idea stage in somebody's head and then watch them be able to execute it out. So it's really exciting to see that. So congratulations.
The feedback you've given me along the way.
Yes, of course. So congratulations on the launch. Really excited to see. And with that, like we've been on a bit of parallel journeys here because at TMSA, we're launching how we're doing things differently as well. And as education co-chair, you've been able to provide lots of feedback on our journey of kind of shifting to a track-based model.
I hope it's been good feedback. You're like, lots of feedback.
Yeah, no, great feedback. I always tell you that I know that you're never afraid to show your opinion, and I love it.
That's true.
So you've been deeply involved in education and leadership development throughout your career, but also in the time that you've been at TMSA. And I'm curious how that has kind of shaped the way you think about growth beyond just revenue numbers, even though that's really important. Or has it? Is it just about the money? What do you think?
Yeah, it can't be just about the money. That's the outcome, of course. If you're working for a for-profit organization, you have to make profit. Like that's the goal that we're all driving towards. But I think the issue is that because that's so clear and obvious in sales, like it's dollars. In operations, there's other factors and things like that, but it's a little bit it's not quite so in your face as sales. So you either hit your dollars or you don't. And I think the focusing too much on the revenue part of it or the activity part of it, like the effort part of it is part of the challenge. You have to look at the whole picture to figure out how you create that the path to growth that really makes the most sense for your organization. So yeah, it can't be just about the money, and it can't be just about like the effort, the muscle.
Yeah, I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking about that too. Like if you just look at activity, like you can be like, oh, wow, I have a sales rep that is crunching and like crushing all the numbers. They send all the emails, they do so many calls, but if they're not closing those, like if the message isn't aligned, if we're not looking at what they're saying in that, then we're missing, all the coaching and their effectiveness. Like
Right.
The goal would be for them to close more on less so that they have more opportunity. And so it's not just about, I always say there's like, I don't believe in like a button seat philosophy, like just because the butt is in the seat. I say it more robustly when I'm not on the air, but like I've worked in places like that where it's like, oh, the person who was at the office first is working the hardest. And that's not necessarily the case. They could be doing who knows? And so if you're not checking into the quality of the work that they're doing, and I think especially in sales, that's important because they may need coaching on how to sell better. And it's not just about how many calls they make in a day or how many emails they send or LinkedIn messages or whatever. If they're not crafting their messaging right, then they're not going to get very far.
Absolutely. The seller process that we talk about is always, it has to be a balance of you want efficiency and you want effectiveness. So you can't just be doing it faster. You can't just be doing more, but you have to be doing it better. So we have to do both of those things. And that's where really that leadership component is so important, because the coaching in the moment, the coaching day to day is really where you're going to know which one of those things your sellers have to do more effectively. Or if they're doing them well. And I think a lot of times we get so stuck in the numbers and the activity, and those are lagging indicators. That's stuff you manage. Once they're done, like, you can't do anything about it. But if you focus on the behavior side, so we manage the outcomes, but we coach the behaviors. If you focus on the behavior side, that's where you can get your sellers to be more efficient, more effective, more in line with your strategy and what your customers really want.
Absolutely. I am so happy that you came on the show and that we got to talk about your, new engagement, your new company, where you're going for 2026. And I'm always helpful, or I always appreciate your help with my own selling and counseling on that, such as, going to trade shows, which will be at Manifest together in a week or so here. I have said on the show like a few times that I'm terrible at going up to trade show booths and announcing myself. And it helps me be better at that.
It's hard, yeah.
But I'm better now. But appreciate your time, both in everything that you do for TMSA and just coming on the show today. But I do have one more question for you. So you've been on the show before, so I can't ask you my normal question. But I do have a second question I ask return guests. And that's if you could relive one day of your life over again. You don't get to change anything. You're just reliving the day. What day would you go back to and why?
Oh, I was thinking about this because you sent this in advance, and I was like, gosh, I feel like two answers came to mind. Can I give you a short version of each? Because they're both like,
absolutely.
I'm such a cheater. I never follow instructions like this. Okay, so I would say, like, first is the most boring answer, but my favorite days are, we have a lake home up in northern Minnesota, and like my family will go up there, and we'll just days where we're just out, the kids are playing outside, we're doing yard work, we're eating on the deck, we're going on the boat. Like, those are untouchable days. They're so fun and rare, and just you got to appreciate the beauty when you're in it. My other answer, this is weird, but I would go back like 25 years, and I spent a summer in Egypt when I was in college with a bunch of other college kids. We were working on stuff over there, and we went to this really cool area that was like very hippie, like scuba diving community. And we just hung out on the beach all day and scuba dived and like sat around and had some drinks in like these couches that are on the beach in the sand after. And it was just like a beautiful, beautiful day. I think we stayed in a hotel that I paid $1 a night for, and it was still like the best trip I ever had.
That is amazing. That is a day to relive. I feel like that's the perfect answer. Like, you're like, I'm an adult now. I love to spend time with my kids. But when I wasn't an adult,
Right.
Full adult, I lived a life.
Yep.
And I would like to maybe just get to revisit that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe one day I'll bring the kids back.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time and coming on the show. If you want to catch us next week's episode will be with Beth Malik and Don Friedel, our current president and president-elect of the board. Holly serves on our board too, so she is very familiar with both of them. But we're going to dive into the new programming at TMSA and why we're kind of heading in this direction. So very excited to talk to both of them. And of course, Holly, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the show, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks for having me. We'll see you.
Thank you.